All right, so hello everyone. My name is Sean Devine. I'm the rental coordinator for ITM Instruments. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar via ITM University. Today's topic is the fundamentals of portable gas detection with BW Honeywell. We kindly ask that you mute your microphone during the presentation. The presentation will last about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have time at the end for Q&A. We encourage you to ask questions at any time. Simply use the chat feature and we'll get to your questions at the end during the Q&A period. ITM Instruments and BW have been working closely together for many years. We pride ourselves on being a leading distributor of BW in Canada. This is a result of our dedication to offering you our product expertise, service, and competitive pricing. All right, let's get started. So today's webinar is presented by Andrew Saunders. He is the Applications and Training Specialist for Honeywell Analytics. Andrew has been in gas detection for 40 years. He's conducted hundreds of technical workshops internationally, so we are very grateful to have Andrew with us today. Andrew, if you could please take it away.
Thank you, Sean, and welcome everyone to today's webinar on the fundamentals of portable gas detection. The agenda for today, we're going to talk about the regulatory landscape in Canada, some of the reminders in confined space and the use of portable gas detectors, two main functions of a portable gas detector, wearing, what things to consider when you're going to put on a portable gas detector, like in the breathing zone, near the breathing zone. We'll go over a tech note that we developed, startup of a gas monitor, and the auto zero function if it's toggled on, so you always make sure you're in fresh air. I will reiterate that, very important. Applications, where they're being used and why for a portable gas monitor. The alarm thresholds program, the default alarm thresholds, and also where you can adjust them based on your own province. In Canada, whatever the regulations are. In Canada is more provincial, even in the States, they would have different thresholds in California as opposed to others. Remote sampling techniques, proper way to do a confined space pretest, and what to do during the alarm situations. List of potential contaminants for the sensors. Calibration versus bump test, what's the difference? Use of an automated station versus a manual test or docking stations. Using an IntelliDocs, the BW docking stations, automated docking station. Maintenance, cleaning, and servicing, what we recommend. Extreme weather conditions, what to do. And then we're going to have, like Sean said, the Q&A. So Canada, each province and territory have their own occupational health and safety acts. Exposure limits can vary from province to province. It's the employers' and workers' responsibility to ensure the compliance with those pertinent regulations. In what employers need to do is to identify confined space hazards, inform employees by posting signs where feasible, and prevent entry by unauthorized persons. A confined space criteria, the definition of a confined space is a workplace that is large enough for a worker to enter, but is not designed or intended for continuous human occupancy and has limited means of entry or exit. When I first got this slide, over on the right-hand side, it actually called it not a confined space, but I put in a question mark, happened to be on the board with the NFPA 350 committee for best practices in entry and work in confined spaces. And we had a bit of a debate between, could the person on the right actually do a confined space entry? And old school thought was, no, you had to completely enter. And others were saying, well, if you break the plane, like scoring a goal or a touchdown or anything like that, then you've technically done a confined space entry. What we did was we just chose the verbiage in and around a confined space and using the same precautions. It's kind of funny, but you can't see this gentleman's face, but he may have a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and methane being lighter than air is right at the top, and could be a very dangerous situation. So in and around a confined space, as soon as you get near it, or certainly if you break the plane, we're going to say that's going to be a confined space. Permit required confined space raises the bar as far as the previous definition, but it also has one or more of the following, which is a hazardous atmosphere, either known or potential to have one, material with the potential for engulfment, inwardly sloping walls or dangerously sloping floors, and contains any other serious safety hazard. So you got to ask yourself, do we have enough ventilation? Sometimes we can use forced ventilation, and it's only like one way in and one way out, and that's a permit required confined space. Typical confined spaces you can see here are storage tanks, process vessels, boilers, sewers. I think the most popular one that people envision is that manhole in the street where you can pop it open and do your pre-test, and it could be typically, water and sewer access, or even telecommunications. You have tunnels, underground utilities, and vaults also in the telecom industry, pipelines, storm drains. The important thing to understand is when you do a pre-test and everything comes out nominal, you have 19 or 20.9% oxygen and no toxic or combustible gases, that work can change, and or that atmosphere can change based on the work that you do. So you can bring in equipment like welding equipment with acetylene and oxygen that can create combustible situation, or even elevated oxygen levels, which can cause things that don't normally burn to burn. These things could be welding, painting, degreasing, scraping, sandblasting, mucking, and certainly inerting when you're getting rid of all the oxygen in a particular confined space. So what we want to do is use a gas monitor to ventilate and monitor continuously. Many accidents result from changes in the confined space atmosphere. We had that with AT&T before the Baby Bell breakup, when they were ventilating in the street, and there was carbon dioxide just from the vehicles. So when they started to do their ventilation process, they were taking what they thought was fresh air, and actually creating carbon dioxide pocket inside the confined space. Monitoring will determine that the air is safe. Ventilation keeps it that way, providing the ventilation is fresh air. The only way to pick up these changes before they become life-threatening is to monitor continuously. Previously, in 1993, when the standard first came out, technological, capabilities at that time with gas detection and runtime and various other factors, it said periodically monitor the atmosphere, and that bar was raised in 2015 when the recommendation came out to continuously monitor unless you absolutely can't. And really that was born about because of the technological advances in gas detectors. So prior to any entry, it's essential to determine that confined space atmosphere is safe. So you need to do the pre-test. Continuously monitoring ensures that workers remain safe. And oftentimes there's an attendant and entrant relationship where the attendant would have one of these two types of BW monitors, whether it's the BW Ultra or the BW Max XT2, which has sampling capabilities up to 75 feet away with the hose. And the workers themselves still would have personal protective devices like a diffusion instrument. In this particular case, it could be the microclip or BW Icon or BW Flex that we just came out with this year for the personal protective devices and gas monitors for each worker in the confined space. And a lot of times we get a question, and this came out actually yesterday. I got a call and says, well, where do we recommend you wear a gas monitor? And Honeywell portable safety gas detector is designed to be worn in harsh outdoor and indoor industrial environments. These environments can include hazardous gases, toxic, combustible, abnormal oxygen levels. So when determining where to wear a gas monitor on your person, it's important to consider the density of the gas hazard. H2S is heavier than air, methane is lighter than air. CO is equivalent to ambient air. But the caveat with the CO is that it usually comes out of an internal combustion engine. So it's hot and it will rise, and then as it cools, it will settle into basically the equivalent density of air. There are devices that can interfere with the gas detection function, so such as a two-way radio. So if it's right next to the antenna of this two-way radio and you key the mic, it can cause a false alarm. So you want to make sure it doesn't conflict with other equipment that you're wearing. And is used, the user easily is able to recognize the alarm. So you want to make sure that the audible, visual, and vibrating alarm can be seen, heard, and felt. We've had workers out in oil fields that wear it on their boot because they understand H2S is heavier than air, and they feel that that's going to give them an added advantage to seeing the gas sooner. But obviously, it's going to be a lot further away from their breathing zone. But given that application, that's what they choose to do. Others would wear it on their hard hat, not a bad thing. In fact, they claim that they can actually even feel the vibrating alarm better on the hard hat than on their chest harness. But obviously, they can hear it very close to the ear, yet they cannot see it flash. So the job of a portable safety gas detector is to alarm the user to a potentially life-threatening atmospheric gas hazard. Use of common sense, and sometimes common sense isn't all that common. That's why training is so important here. But use of common sense, consider the source of the hazard, where the device as close to the breathing zone as possible or as practical, and where the alarm condition will be obvious and you'll be able to react to it. The detector should be experiencing the same atmospheric conditions as the worker. In most of these confined spaces, the atmosphere is quite homogenized. If you do a pre-test prior to entry, oftentimes it'll be before you even open the hatch, and there might be some vent holes that you can drop the hose in, and you can do what's called an as found, or with the static environment. That's more or less where the gases are going to stratify and hang out high, low, and equal to air based on their gravimetric weight. So the detector should experience the same atmospheric hazards once you go in. You may want to take that reading, but then as you start to introduce ventilation, you're going to stir up that gas. So even if you're wearing it on your hip, the typically it's going to be the same atmosphere that's a foot or two away from your nose and mouth, which would be considered the breathing zone. The other thing to consider is that if it's too close to the nose and mouth, if you download the data logs after using the detector, you might see the oxygen have like a sawtooth curve of going up and down as you inhale and exhale, and it sees low oxygen. So the readings can be affected if it's too close to the breathing zone, ironically. And just understanding the hazards, like we said, some gases are lighter than air, both combustible and toxic gases, as well as gases that are heavier than air. So what you see on the right-hand side is a rule of thumb to go every 4 feet in the direction of travel. So if you had a 10-foot drop, typically it would be top, middle, and bottom, and you would want to detect for the gas in a significant amount of time. Give the time that it takes for the gas to come up the hose, and also additional time for the sensors to reach what's called T90 response time. That's the time it takes for the sensors to reach 90% of full response. Often you can get there within 30 seconds, whereas if you want the full 100% response, you may have to wait a minute to a minute and a half longer. So the full time, if you get any reading other than nominal at each level, top, middle, and bottom, then I recommend that you take the full 2 minutes for the stable to reach T100, because in permit required confined spaces, you're going to have to document that value. So the gas hazards, what are we talking about? Atmospheric hazards. Well, it's oxygen, both enrichment and deficiency. We can all understand quite easily, oxygen deficiency, but oxygen enrichment is also a problem, especially when you have it in around any kind of flammable gas. And it will actually lower the lower explosive limit of that flammable gas if you have oxygen enrichment. If you remember the Apollo missions early on in Apollo 1, astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee burned to death in a fire on the launch pad down here in Florida, Kennedy Space Center, because a small spark under Gus Grissom's seat turned into a blazing inferno because they were under pressurized 100% oxygen. They got away with it for many years in the Mercury and Gemini program, and you would think NASA knew everything, but they really didn't know the environment that they were working in was that dangerous. So enrichment is important. Deficiency is probably the #1 cause of deaths in a confined space. Then you have the flammable gases and toxic gases. Always, in terms of any type of confined space entry, you need to have an emergency response plan. And it has been said that 60% of workers killed in confined space accidents are would-be rescuers. We just had one in Key Largo, Florida, where and this was 3 years ago now, but I got involved in it after the fact, working with Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, because that was their kind of, they kind of adopted that Monroe County fire response team and helped them out. But the neighbors were complaining of a rotten egg smelling smell in their neighborhood, and turned out to be the sewer. And they had 3 workers go out there. 1 worker went in, didn't come out. A 2nd worker went in after him. He didn't come out. And even a 3rd went in. And after the 3rd one didn't come out, they called 911. And the firefighter, who was young, he couldn't fit through that confined space opening. So he took off his self-contained breathing apparatus, and he went into cardiac arrest. With him, fortunately, he made a full recovery. But it is very true that, often more it's the would-be rescuers than the one that actually made that poor decision in the first place. So those emergency response plans must reflect the specific dangers of the confined space, and the attendant should not enter a confined space until help arrives, even if that entrant is having a problem. In the first instance, you would want to have self-rescue. They can get out on their own. Non-entry rescue, where you maybe have a harness attached to them. And lastly, entry rescue, where you have to go in after them. Now, when we talk about pre-entry testing, this is what I was talking about, getting a little bit of snapshot as to the ecstatic environment before you open that hatch there. So you can sample right at the top there. And then we do recommend, as a best practice, know which way the wind's blowing, and even open the hatch upwind. And then you can do further testing, or once you've done the top, middle, and bottom, then you can actually go in and do the entry once you know there's no hazardous atmosphere. These are the type of monitors. Even a diffusion monitor equipped with a hand aspirator can get it done. And yes, we do know that people still out there are lowering the monitor or diffusion monitor into the confined space. It's the only danger there is maybe damaging it, getting into a dark area, and then getting the water, putting it into some kind of water, or it's rarely distilled water, right? So it could be sewage water, and doing any kind of damage, whether it's permanent or even temporary, to that day's work on the monitor. So best practice would be to have a pumped unit with a catch or a hydrophobic filter that you're seeing right here, and on the back of the Max XT2 would prevent water from getting inside of the instrument. And these are the gases. The first 4 that are in bold: oxygen, combustible in terms of LEL, lower explosive limit, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulfide. That's what we consider to be the standard 4-gas configuration. But you need to know your hazards. And in many cases, if we're working in a refrigeration application, we might want to have that 5th gas be ammonia. The units that you see here can do all of these different gases, but up to 5 or 6 at a time, max on 6 with the multi-ray, and 5 for the BW Ultra on the right there. But you can have your standard 4 gases and even have a PID to detect for volatile organic compounds. Many wastewater treatment workers are using a 5-gas now, because they never know what somebody's going to flush down into the system that they're working in. And this is a slide, take a look at, where we're looking at all these different industries and what the threats are in each industry, common threats, we should say. It's not exclusive, and it may be in some cases where there's not a checkbox, that particular application they do have. But this is basically a takeaway that you can see these four gases on the right, the combustible, oxygen, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulfide. This is heavily populated here on the left-hand side. That's your standard four gas configuration that's going to meet the needs of most all of these industries. Then you see a lot of sparsely populated gases from sulfur dioxide, ammonia, chlorine dioxide, carbon dioxide. Sometimes people confuse CO with CO2 and vice versa. Hydrogen cyanide, nitric oxide, and nitrogen dioxide. Ozone, phosphine in the fumigation industry, formaldehyde, hydrogen chloride, hydrogen fluoride, and all of the VOCs that you see here on the right. Notice that sparsely populated, these are good opportunities for single gas or that fifth gas in a five gas, but the most popular fifth sensor in a five gas monitor, aside from the standard four, is a PID that will do these volatile organic compounds in a broad range kind of catch-all, where it can detect a lot of methyl ethyl whatever's out there. Not going to speciate, not going to know exactly what's there, but it's going to give you a higher level of protection. And like I said, wastewater treatment industry likes to have that extra level of protection. Given that the cost has come down considerably over the years, it's now more feasible to do. Sometimes you just want to know what is fresh air, and for the most part, it's oxygen and nitrogen account for 99% of fresh air. Oxygen at 20.9, nitrogen at 78. That 1%, or 1% other gases, mostly is an inert gas such as argon, and then you have other gases, and of course, carbon dioxide. So you can see it here broken down. But really what we're looking at is nitrogen and oxygen for the most part. And this is just in case I had put any of you to sleep. This is usually a wake up moment, but in this particular case, you can see that's methane that he's igniting. And I'm sure that he thought he was just going to show the kids a loud kaboom and, have that little bit of a wow factor. He ended up breaking his collarbone. I'm not sure if it was the right one when the manhole hit him on the right-hand side or when he fell hard on his left collarbone broke. But yeah, this is exactly what can happen. Now, pre-test would have told him, you've got combustible gases, and would have drove it way into past the 100% LEL into overrange on the BW monitor. But when you're testing for combustible gases, we test in terms of percent LEL. So, for example, methane, 5% methane in air is the lower explosive limit of methane. So below 5%, it's too lean to burn. Above 5%, it will be optimal until it gets to a point where it's above 15%. Then it's displaced enough oxygen that it's too rich to burn. So you have that opportunity between 5 and 15% for methane or natural gas for it to be combustible. What the gas monitor will do will detect the range before you get into the flammable range, and even give you an early warning alarm at 10% of that LEL. So you have early warning to not even mess around. If it hits 10%, you need to get out and take, and remedy the situation, whether it's through ventilation or time. But that's, and best practices for hot work, if you're doing welding, is to set that lower alarm to 5%, because it is more critical in that particular application. So gas exposure alarms, we're talking about oxygen, both low and high, combustible gases, low and high, and the toxic gases actually have 4 different alarms. It has a low and high immediate alarm, but it also has a time-weighted average and short-term exposure limit alarm that are based on concentration over time. TWA is an 8-hour time, but that can be adjustable since not everybody works just a 8-hour day anymore. And STEL is a short-term exposure limit. Based on your province, what you'll find is that the TWA typically one and done. You get a TWA alarm, say for example, you can breathe. In Canada, the recommendation or requirement is 25 ppm CO for an 8-hour day, and that's the average, which means that if you double that and you hit 50, it will cut your time that you can work in that confined space in half. So, once you hit 50 ppm over 4 hours, you're going to get a time-weighted average, which says that based on a projected value, even if you stop and breathe fresh air for the rest of the day, right now you've hit your toxic threshold limit. So then therefore you're done, and you do need to go into a fresh air environment, come back tomorrow. We do have the immediate alarms to, warn you multiple times. But once you hit that TWA alarm, you're done for the day. The other recommendation on the STEL, the 15-minute average, is that would be, you could get 4 STELs in one day, and then you're done. So you get one, exit, wait till the STEL goes away, come back out, maybe do some ventilation as well, or maybe that truck has moved on and you're no longer contaminating the area. So you can get 4 STELs in one day, but TWA, you're one and done. And these gas alarms are set very, very conservatively to give you early warning so the workers can evacuate safely. So what to do during an alarm? We kind of call it ring and run. Evacuate, advise the supervisor immediately. In fact, many of our BW monitors, if you get a high alarm, it may change that green IntelliFlash into an amber, kind of an actionable, something went on here. If I go back and I dock it into the docking station, or at least, if a safety manager is walking by, he can see that something has occurred and can take a look at the peaks, averages, and STELs and determine, yeah, in fact, it got a low oxygen alarm or high CO alarm. So once you make the appropriate corrections and do more ventilation if needed, reevaluate the atmosphere like you're testing it for the very first time before working in that area. Just looking at where our market share is, and we looked at this in North America in 2014, and it's kind of hard to get this data, and then North America again in 2019 hasn't changed that much. You can see, also can see how the oil and gas industry can really affect the revenue. And in this particular case, through COVID, when you saw the gas prices go down, yeah, obviously that market shrunk. However, during this time, Honeywell made a concerted effort to educate all of our channel partners and end users that, these vertical markets such as wastewater and utilities, we did focus on that, and we saw high growth in these regions just by educating people about the hazards in these specific areas. So we did really increase the revenue here, given the opportunity, or because of the sales dropping in the oil and gas industry, which is basically a quarter of all these revenue streams. So this is the BW family of portable safety gas monitors today. Sorry about that, it auto advanced on me, but these are the 2 docking stations we have. MicroDock, which was developed about 15 years ago, and then the IntelliDocks, which came out just a few years ago. And these are the 2 docking stations that are still currently servicing all of these monitors: Max XT2, Quattro, Ultra, Gas Alert Micro 5, BW Clip 4, BW Microclip XL and X3. Difference between these 2: 2-year bumper-to-bumper warranty, 3-year bumper-to-bumper warranty. And with this sensor, oxygen sensor, we expect that an expected life of 5 years. So you really get a lot more value in this monitor, as opposed, still this is the most popular monitor out there. Now, most recently, we've come up with the BW Icon and Icon Flex, which is going to have Bluetooth capability and it's going to be able to be wirelessly connected to other devices, so we can truly have a connected worker scenario. BW Solo, also optional Bluetooth, and the BW Clip and BW Clip real-time single gas monitor. Those are the 2-year and 3-year disposable single gas, respectively, that can do O2, CO, H2S, and SO2. We do have confined space kits that are going to have everything that you would need, including your sampling hose, maybe some vehicle chargers, the valve and hose to do a bump test on site if you wish. When you're selling gas detection or purchasing gas detection, these are the questions that you really need to ask yourself, or whomever you're offering a gas detection solution to. Number one, are you currently using portable gas detection, and what is your application? Where are gas monitors being used? This is a 90% replacement market. Most of the people we sell to gas detection today already own a gas monitor. Like somebody going out and buying a car, most likely they already own a car. They're looking to upgrade, to replace. And so you want to really understand what they currently have, an as-found condition. What do they have, single gas or multi-gas? If I go back to the AT&T scenario that we were involved in '92, and I am taking you back and dating myself, but it was a significant thing where we had to go up there because they thought our monitors weren't working properly, because everything they used prior to that, they didn't have these problems, and then they start using these multi-gas monitors by Lumador, which eventually was acquired by Honeywell. The units were going in and out of alarm. Well, actually, with the traffic light going red and traffic backing up, they also had older ventilators where it was a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower engine, where the intake was next to the exhaust and of the engine, and it was creating more CO, grabbing it and blowing it down into the hole. They actually sent yours truly up there to evaluate the situation and to see what was going on, because this was a $1.6 million order the year before. They were talking about sending them all back, and they wanted their money back. Well, that was a pretty serious situation, but when I went up there and I assessed the situation, it was obvious that it was CO, but I didn't understand why they never had this problem before. Well, the fact was, if I'd have asked them this, I would have found out they were only using oxygen and LEL meters at the time, and they were replacing it with a 4-gas. The first time they ever were detecting for carbon monoxide. Actually, at the end of the day, somebody pulled me off the side and said, some of my workers were complaining about headaches and even thought they were coming down with the flu. If it was on a Friday, I just thought they were trying to get out of work early, because they came back Monday looking fine. But we were getting them sick, weren't we, Drew? And basically, I said, it's a very strong likelihood you were, given the situation that we just saw here, when you combine not just the traffic in the road, but also that generator that was producing even more carbon monoxide, like a car parked next to that manhole opening. So you really want to know, is it single gas or multi-gas, and then what gases? In this particular case, we would have known, all right, well, you've gone from 2 gases to 4 gases. If it's the CO that's alarming, guess what? You probably have CO. Pump models or diffusion. We saw that earlier. Can you take a sample up to 75 feet away? Docking stations or manual calibration and bump testing. What are some of the features and benefits that are important to you in a gas monitor? I mean, to simplify this, it's what do you have? What do you like about it? What are you looking for? And what is your instrument management system? When I came to BW led the way in docking stations. When I came in 2007, I had one of our sales reps down in the Gulf region in Texas tell me, Drew, I sell dock first. Then we'll determine what's best for them from a gas monitor standpoint. I also was involved in 2006, sold the first docking station from a company called Crocon, and I had called on this company before, and they had 7 gas monitors. 3 months later, they called me and they said, can you give us a quote, Drew, on 75 gas monitors? I was like, absolutely. And he said, but don't even talk to us unless you have a docking station. Right away, I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, we just had a death in a confined space. So I was there virtually the next day, and I tend to talk loud. He said, Drew, can you keep your voice down? The gentleman who passed away, his dad's next door signing papers. That's how fresh it was. So really what it comes down to is, what instrument management system do you use? Kind of jumping ahead to 4. But going back to 2, what are some of the features and benefits that are important to you? Ease of use is a big one. Ruggedness and reliability, they're going to take a beating. Not necessarily the initial cost. Of course, that's going to be a concern, but overall, the long-term cost of ownership. Are they going to be something that's going to be in and out of the service department on a regular basis? And now more and more, we're talking about the wireless capability. In my opinion, 5 years from now, we're all going to be connected, and we're going to be able to remotely see what our workers are experiencing in any kind of an atmospheric hazard with the gas monitor. The challenges will be the compliance. Did they bump test prior to that day's use? Is the unit fully calibrated within its interval? And also, some of these connected worker software programs can tell you that in real time. So, we've got Safety Suite real-time software, which is a subscription-based service that you can subscribe to, whether you have 1 unit or 1,000 units, and it will be able to track all of these monitors. And you can even see, a green, icon on the screen in the exact location where the worker is, that may change to yellow if they didn't bump test it that morning when it was due, or if it wasn't calibrated, even though it's not an alarm. Of course, if it goes in alarm, you would see red. So we talked about what kind of instrument management system do you use. Everybody's got one, and that's why I showed you that picture, or it's coming up soon, in 1958 of a mining company over in the UK, where they were using flame safety lamps, or Davies lamps, over there. And it was a very place for everything in its place, numbered, and a gentleman that would take care and oversee making sure they were ready for use at any given time. So it's very important, but do you want to have one that was automated? So the story I have told you about, where there was a death in a confined space, obviously now they've got to have documentation that showed proper care and maintenance of the product. I think at that particular time, all they had were stickers on the monitor every time they calibrated it. They say last calibrated today, next calibration due 30 days from now. But over the use and where they were used, sometimes you couldn't even read these labels that they stuck to them a week later. So it was a severe weakness, and just having one docking station that they could use that would bump and calibrate their monitors and automatically document all this, that was what they needed to provide as objective evidence to whomever was questioning. So when we ask how important is proper record keeping with the ability to identify employee compliance and gas exposures, this is what we're talking about, an automated instrument management system. So talking about these instrument management systems, this is the picture I was referring to over in the UK. In 1958, they were very diligent about maintaining their instruments, but it was probably just, stickers and paperwork that they did with the pen and paper. Now can all automatically be done, bump test and record storage system with the IntelliDocs, BW IntelliDocs. Kind of removes or mitigates human subjectivity from bump test, and it gives you unequivocal pass and fail indications. Like the screen, it's simply green, yellow, and red. It also works with our software, Safety Suite Device Configurator, which is freeware. You can download and install, and interfaces with the monitors directly, in some cases with the IR connectivity kit, or with the dock, even on a wide area network internet. So fully automated bump and record storage system. And by the way, somebody told me a long time ago, and I've used it ever since then, Eva Morano-Ventris told me that, Drew, documentation beats confrontation, and it's true. Now, Honeywell is on the board of the International Safety Equipment Association. On that board with us is our competitors, MSA, Draeger, 3M, used to be Biosystems and Scott Safety, but through acquisition, The four of us that are left still represent both of them. Although now I just heard somebody else bought Scott off of 3M. In any case, we worked hard at working together to develop the criteria or the definition of a bump test. Somebody jokingly said, well, where did even the term bump test come from? And somebody said, well, early on in the mining, when the miner took the canary in a cage, he would bump it on the table to make sure it was still alive. So he knew that it would protect him when he took it down into the mine. Kind of an interesting, I don't know if anybody can confirm that, but it's more of a go, no go or qualitative function check, where the challenge gas is passed over the sensors at a concentration and exposure time sufficient to activate all alarm indicators to present at least their lower alarm setting. And the purpose of this check is to confirm that the gas can get to the sensors, the filter's not clogged, and the alarms present are functional. You can hear them, you can see them, in some cases feel them, and with the vibrating alarm. And typically dependent upon the response time of the sensor or the minimum level of response achieved, such as 80% of the gas concentration. So if I apply 100 ppm CO, I might set the threshold that if it reaches at least 80, I'm going to give it a pass. Note the check is not intended to provide any measure of calibration accuracy. That's where calibration check comes in. That's a quantitative test where we actually can set up the docks for that threshold of 80 or 90%, not just the lower alarm, which is around the 40% range of the go, no go qualitative function check. The quantitative function check is just that. It's going to look at the value of the cylinder's gas levels for CO, 100 ppm. The BW mix is 100 ppm CO, 25 ppm H2S, 18% oxygen, and 50% LEL methane. And it's going to accept it in this particular case if it's plus or minus 10 or 20%. Understand the gas itself has got a tolerance of plus or minus 5%, so you can't really ask a gas monitor to be any better than that. Full span calibration, both A and B, does not do any kind of adjustment to the monitor. Full calibration will adjust the sensors to match the response, or the sensor's response to match the value of the known traceable concentration of the gas you're using. And this should be done within the manufacturer's instructions. So that's where you would actually go into it or use the docking station, not only for bump testing, but for full span calibration. And again, it makes it a lot easier and mitigates human error. This is our Safety Suite device configurator software. Just to give you a general overview, it's basic device management, no charge. On-premise means it's local on your computer. It's a single brand experience for both BW and Ray. It speaks both languages of those two brands of Honeywell portable gas detection, and expand and supports the base of instrument business with the state-of-the-art technology. Defend customer base by replacing multiple existing legacy software, like you're probably used to Fleet Manager 2 if you know the BW line. That's still active and out there, but this is the next generation has been out here since 2018, and it can connect with the end user. Some of the benefits is it minimizes device management overhead, streamlines everyday tasks, simplify user interaction, combine portable product offerings. So as you know, Honeywell portable gas detection primarily is those two cultures of Ray Systems and BW. And this allows our customers to use both without any kind of two-program installation. Address data privacy and concerns. Our legal team has looked at all of the features on this product to make sure that we're not going to get hacked in any way. Device connectivity, Ethernet, microdock, BLE connection. We talked about, like in some of the monitors like the Solo and the Icon. Even the BW Ultra has Bluetooth in every instrument. You have the IR dongle for the microclip, Max XT2, and the Icon series, as well as the Ultra. And then you get into some of the Ray products down here. Poisoning of sensors can be a big problem. Permanent damage to sensors caused by cleaner solvents and lubricants. Recommend using a neutral cleaner like this ACL staticide, or just a warm, damp cloth. Some people think, well, if you go green and you use a citrus-based cleaner, that won't harm the sensors. It actually will. The D-limonene in that citrus-based cleaner will poison the catalytic bead sensors. I'm sorry, the electrochemical sensors. Catalytic bead is usually the kryptonite for that sensor is Armor All, WD-40, lubricant solvents. So it's really the reason why we do bump testing each day prior to each day's use, is because of these good today, bad tomorrow scenarios based on the poisoning. Another idea of some of the key poisons and inhibitors that can affect the sensor's performance. Once again, silicone is the #1 suspect when any kind of poisoning occurs on the LEL sensor. This came out during COVID. It's on our website just to know how to properly clean your instruments and making sure at the same time you do not poison the sensors and damage the monitor that's meant to protect you. So a clean monitor is no help if it doesn't detect gas for you. And that's it for today's presentation. I'm just going to kick it over to Sean here, and we can take the Q&A.
All right, well, thank you so much, Andrew. That was great. For everyone else, it's time for you to take advantage of having an expert like Andrew with us to answer any and all questions you might have. So to send in a question, just use the chat feature. Please note that if you have any product-specific questions, such as price or availability, we encourage you to visit itm.com. There you will find a list of products, pricing, availability, tech specs, as well as our contact information and all the different ways you can connect with us. Our technical support staff will be happy to address and answer any and all questions you might have. So I'll just see what questions we have now, Andrew. All right, so Jamin asked, what is the difference between zero gas and oxygen 20.8%?
So zero gas is typically like if you were calibrating a carbon dioxide meter. There's in fresh air, there's 400 ppm carbon dioxide. So if you need to do zero air, sometimes we recommend just using nitrogen so that you know that you can zero it and it's not really a real world situation where fresh air is going to have 400 ppm at least. If you're indoors, could be upwards of 1,000 ppm. So you just can zero that out. For the most of our monitors, you just need fresh air. So if you have a docking station, there's no cylinder hooked up there. If you have a docking station and you're calibrating a CO2 meter, then you would use zero air or nitrogen.
Okay, we have a question from Norm, but I don't know if maybe it needed to have been addressed during the presentation. We might have to contact you, Norm, about this. But do cell phones cause the same issue as the two-way? Fortunately,
we've not had an issue. And when we talk about this, and if you can think about it, a two-way radio is much different than a cell phone, and it's keying that mic, and it's going to broadcast a very strong signal over a short period of time. It has no cell towers to reach, and the frequency is going to be more in tune with kind of interrupting the performance of a gas monitor. Having said all that, we've come a long way from where it was a major issue to where it's a minor issue now. So I would say don't put the antenna directly on it. And here's what you'll find. If you have a monitor such as a chlorine dioxide meter or an ozone meter, where the sensor technology, it's very weak as far as what kind of output it can produce. So we have to amplify that signal quite high, creating what's called a high impedance circuit. That's almost like an antenna in and of itself that will pick up that radio frequency. We haven't had any issues with cell phones. In fact, we have apps that will directly tether to a device nowadays.
Okay, great. Well, that definitely answers it. We have another question here, and I don't know if this is getting too specific, but could you comment on agricultural silos? Currently, this this client uses your detectors to work safely to the best of their ability. Is an agricultural silo a confined space, and are there any special legalities regarding those?
So oftentimes, and we did a lot of work with ADM, if you're familiar with them, Archer Daniels Midland, that we feed the world. And fumigation is a gas. They use phosphine gas for fumigation. And they need to inspect these silos. And yes, it is a confined space. And most often it's a permit required confined space. But, it varies. And, you can have small farms which haven't really been regulated. We didn't want to put a lot of regulation on mom and pop farms in that. So, tragedies occur. Everybody knows the one that, a lady lost her husband, her son, and her father in a manure pit because of H2S and trying to save one another. In silos, you have explosive dust. The grain dust is explosive. Have you ever heard of a silo exploding? And so oftentimes you need a monitor that is intrinsically safe certified. And we typically use CSA, Canadian Standards Association, for intrinsic safety certification. But it would also have to be Class 2 certified, not just Class 1. Class 1 is for use in environments of explosive gas and vapors. And not that it'll detect explosive dust, but you can use it in Class 2 environments for explosive gas, vapor, and dust. And it will not ignite a potential explosive environment. So that's a consideration in silos for grain.
Perfect, thanks. And if there's any follow-up questions to anything you guys are asking, just please feel free to email us or contact us, and our tech support team will help. We have another question here. It's, is the docking station affected by where it is located, like inside an office or a shop that trucks are on?
Correct, yes. Remember, it's got to be in a fresh air environment. Now, occasionally, like in steel mills, I've been involved in areas where you can't have a fresh air environment. So rather than have that fresh air inlet exposed to just ambient air, you will attach hospital grade air to it in a cylinder. And therefore that, the exception there would be, if you can't maintain it in a fresh air environment, then you're going to have to do added work to ensure that when it goes through its purge cycle and its zero cycle, that it's not taking a background level of, say, even 20 ppm CO and calling that zero, which would mean that you would need an additional 25 or actually 45 ppm CO to even see 25 and it go into alarm. So that's the danger there. Good question.
Perfect. And we actually, Jamin is asking to follow up on the zero gas and oxygen question. Could he use the 20.8% oxygen to zero the instrument?
I'll tell you this, that there's no better calibration for the monitor when it goes through its auto zero fresh air cal than fresh air. When they're trying to, fill a cylinder of 18%, for our, because we have to have low oxygen for it to pass a bump test. So during that calibration phase, you can use it, but there's nothing better than real fresh air.
Perfect. Well, I think that is everything. If anyone has some last minute questions, feel free to send them over. If not, our technical support team is there to help. Anything you have, we will be able to support. On behalf of ITM University, we want to thank you for attending our webinar today. We hope you found it informative and helpful. We are able to assist you in any way, so simply visit us at itm.com for anything you need, including our contact info. At the end of this webinar, you're going to see a very short survey that we'd like you to complete. Your feedback will assist us in improving and allowing us to bring you more topics that are of interest to you. We have upcoming webinars of the next few weeks and months. Please visit the training section on itm.com for a full schedule of the upcoming webinars and topics. Don't forget that as a thank you for attending our webinar today, your name will be entered in the draw to win $100 towards your next online order. The winner will be announced on our social media channels, so be sure to check us out there. And lastly, I just want to say a huge thanks, Andrew. That was great. I think we've all learned a lot today.
My pleasure, and thank you for allowing us to do this.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.